Some people don't pull away because they stopped caring. They pull away because caring started feeling overwhelming. And if you're bisexual, there's a strange emotional contradiction that can quietly follow you for years. You crave closeness. But the moment someone gets too close, something inside you starts asking for space. Not because you don't love them, not because you're emotionally unavailable, but because somewhere along the way intimacy became associated with pressure, and distance became associated with relief. The problem is that relief never lasts very long. Because the moment you finally get the space you wanted, you start worrying about what that space is doing to the relationship. You wonder if they're feeling rejected. You wonder if they're losing interest. You wonder if you're creating the exact distance you were trying to avoid. And suddenly the thing that felt freeing yesterday feels terrifying today. A lot of bisexual people know this cycle better than they realize. The need for space, the fear of distance, the constant emotional tug-of-war between the two. And what's dangerous is that from the outside, it rarely looks like fear. It looks like inconsistency. It looks like mixed signals. It looks like confusion. But underneath all of it, there's usually a much deeper story. A story that often starts long before dating, long before relationships, long before adulthood. Because many bisexual people grow up becoming experts at managing emotional environments. They learn how to read rooms, how to assess safety, how to adjust themselves depending on who they're around, how much of themselves can be shown, how much needs to stay hidden, and eventually that habit becomes automatic. Without noticing it, they stop asking, "What do I need?" and start asking, "What version of me is safest right now?" That changes people, quietly, over time, because when your identity spends years being monitored, your nervous system learns to monitor everything else too, relationships included, especially relationships. This is why some bisexual people don't experience intimacy as pure comfort. They experience it as exposure. The closer someone gets, the more visible they become. The more visible they become, the harder it becomes to relax. Because visibility creates vulnerability. And vulnerability creates uncertainty. And uncertainty can feel dangerous when you've spent years emotionally preparing for rejection. That's the part most people never see. The need for space is often not about independence. It's about recovery. Recovery from constant emotional awareness. Recovery from constantly evaluating yourself through someone else's eyes. Recovery from being psychologically on all the time. Modern culture makes this even worse. Because today's relationships don't exist in private. They exist in notifications, read receipts, Instagram stories, location sharing, daily texting expectations, constant accessibility. People now confuse emotional availability with permanent availability. And those are not the same thing. Not even close. Someone can deeply love you and still need silence. Someone can be emotionally invested and still need solitude. Someone can miss you and still need distance from the emotional noise. But modern relationship culture often interprets space as danger. If someone takes longer to respond, something must be wrong. If someone needs a day alone, something must be wrong. If someone pulls back emotionally, something must be wrong. And eventually people start policing their own emotional needs, especially bisexual people who already fear being misunderstood. So they stay connected when they need rest. They stay available when they need silence. They stay engaged when they're emotionally exhausted. And slowly, they begin disappearing inside the relationship. That's where the real damage starts. Because suppressed needs don't disappear. They accumulate, like pressure, until eventually the person who wanted closeness starts fantasizing about escape. Not because the relationship is unhealthy, because they no longer have room to exist inside it. And then something confusing happens. They finally create distance, and immediately panic, because now another fear shows up. The fear of being forgotten, the fear of being replaced, the fear that space will become separation. This contradiction is brutal. Wanting distance from someone while simultaneously fearing distance from them. Needing room to breathe while worrying every breath creates more separation. It's exhausting, but it's also incredibly common, especially among people who learned early in life that connection could disappear unexpectedly. When acceptance feels conditional, attachment becomes complicated. Part of you wants closeness. Part of you prepares for loss. At the same time, this creates a hidden emotional behavior. Many bisexual people become emotional scanners. Not communicators, scanners. They're constantly reading for signs. Changes in tone. Changes in response speed. Changes in affection. Changes in energy. Looking for evidence. Looking for reassurance. Looking for clues. Trying to predict abandonment before it happens. The problem is that emotional scanning never creates safety. It only creates more scanning. Because once your brain becomes responsible for monitoring threats, it struggles to stop monitoring, even when no threat exists. That's why reassurance often doesn't work for very long. You can tell someone they're loved. You can tell someone they're safe. You can tell someone you're staying. But if their nervous system learned to expect instability, words become temporary relief, not permanent security. And modern dating culture feeds directly into this wound. Because people are more connected than ever, and less emotionally certain than ever. Everyone is accessible. Everyone is replaceable. Everyone is one swipe away from someone else. Or at least that's how it feels. The internet created a world where comparison never stops, where alternatives never disappear, where intimacy competes with infinite options. And for someone already struggling with fears of distance, that environment can feel psychologically exhausting, because every moment of silence becomes open to interpretation. Every delayed response becomes a possible story. Every shift in energy becomes potential evidence. People don't disappear slowly anymore. They disappear algorithmically. And once someone has experienced enough emotional uncertainty, their imagination starts filling in gaps reality never confirmed. That's when relationships become mentally louder than they are emotionally. And something interesting starts happening. The person who needs space begins apologizing for having needs. They apologize for needing alone time. Apologize for being overwhelmed. Apologize for not texting enough. Apologize for needing recovery. Apologize for existing differently. Eventually they stop asking for space altogether and start shrinking instead. That's the tragedy. Because emotional self-erasure often looks like relationship effort. From the outside it looks caring. Inside it feels suffocating. And the longer it continues, the more disconnected they become from themselves. Not from the relationship, from themselves. That's why some bisexual people eventually hit a wall. A strange emotional burnout. where they no longer know whether they want closeness or escape, whether they want connection or solitude, whether they feel trapped or lonely, because they've spent so long managing other people's emotional experience. They've lost contact with their own. And that's when the deepest realization finally appears. The issue was never space. The issue was what space meant. For some people, space means freedom. For others, space means abandonment. For others, space means survival. And when those meanings collide inside the same person, every relationship becomes a psychological battlefield. One part reaching forward, another part pulling back. One part craving intimacy, another part preparing for loss. One part wanting connection, another part protecting itself from it. The truth is, most people think emotional conflict happens between two people. But some of the most painful conflicts happen entirely inside one person. Invisible, silent, constant. And maybe that's the hidden psychology behind bisexual people who need space but fear distance. Not confusion, not inconsistency, not indecision, but a nervous system trying to solve two opposing fears at the same time. The fear of disappearing inside relationships, and the fear of losing them, because some people don't spend their lives choosing between closeness and distance. They spend their lives trying to survive both, and that creates a haunting reality. The deepest human desire is not constant connection. It's not endless attention. It's not permanent reassurance. It's emotional rest. A place where closeness doesn't feel consuming, and distance doesn't feel threatening. A place where you can step back without being forgotten, and come closer without losing yourself. For many people, that's all they've ever been looking for.